Hey everyone, it's me again. The guy who shared that wild story about the bunny saga. You might remember how my wife let our kids release a wild bunny right in the middle of our yard, even though I suggested we take it to the bushes for a safer release. Unfortunately, a hawk swooped down and snatched the bunny right in front of our 4 and 5-year-old children. They were so upset, they started calling their mom the Bunny Destroyer. This nickname stuck, especially after her affair came to light. But as crazy as that story was, what I'm about to share will blow your mind even more. So buckle up because it's going to be quite the ride. A couple of months ago, I finalized my divorce and officially became a free man. Let me tell you, it's been an intense journey. In a bold move, I showed my wife my original post about the bunny incident. She was furious, and it sparked a huge fight, leading to a week of silent treatment from her. I even tried to get our kids to stop calling her the Bunny Destroyer by grounding them and giving timeouts, but that nickname just wouldn't go away whenever they got mad at her. Eventually, my wife apologized and admitted she should have taken my advice about the bunny. She said she felt the need to defend herself because she didn't want to admit she was wrong. I accepted her apology and even apologized for sharing our story. Things seemed to be getting better, and I suggested marriage counseling. She refused, acting like everything was fine between us. So I didn't push it further. But a few weeks later, my eldest daughter came to me with something that had been bothering her for months. She revealed that her mom had been having a man over on Saturdays when I was at work, calling him her special friend. My daughter had noticed something was off, and despite my wife's attempts to keep the kids quiet with bribes, she couldn't hide the truth forever. Kids are perceptive, and they pick up on things quickly, even when adults think they won't. My wife's behavior had changed recently. She was more irritable, especially with the kids. When I tried talking to her about my initial post, she exploded, attacking everything about me from my appearance to my habits, even bringing up that I used to smoke over a decade ago. She started locking me out of our bedroom and crying loudly enough for the entire house to hear. Connecting the dots, I realized she might be cheating. Her behavior resembled the mood swings she had during her pregnancies, only worse this time. Though I'm no psychologist, it made sense considering what I found online and what friends and a counselor told me about mood swings, hormones, and projection due to infidelity. I hoped it was all a misunderstanding, but the signs were too clear to ignore. So, I took action and ordered hidden cameras, having them delivered to my workplace to keep it a secret from her. Setting up the cameras was easy, and within a few hours, I could monitor our house from my laptop. At first, I worried I was going too far, but my worst fears were confirmed within a week. Her affair partner, a former colleague she had mentored, was younger by almost a decade. They had stayed close even after she left her job to become a full-time mom. When I confided in my sister, she told me she had suspected something for a while and had seen my wife getting too cozy with a man at a local bar. To gather more evidence, I ordered a GPS tracker and hid it in the trunk of my wife's car. My sister and her husband helped me track her movements. One night, instead of going to her usual hangout with friends, she went 20 miles away to meet her affair partner. My sister recorded them, noticing the man rubbing my wife's belly. That's when it hit me. She was pregnant with his baby. Devastated, I wanted to drown my sorrows in alcohol, but my sister wisely advised against it. Instead, I pretended to go on a business trip to give my wife the opportunity to invite her affair partner over. With cameras all over the house, I recorded everything they did and said, including their jokes about me and discussions about their baby. She admitted to having cheated on me before and called our kids his because she didn't want them anymore. The next day, I went to a top divorce lawyer and showed him the evidence. He was eager to take my case. Weeks later, I had my wife served with divorce papers while working from home. She stormed into my office, but I remained calm, telling her I wanted her out of my house, which I was solely paying for. She threatened to spread lies about me, but I told her to go ahead. I had more than enough evidence to counter any false claims. When the police arrived after she called them with a fabricated story, I showed them the footage proving her lies. She was arrested for making false accusations, and I canceled all her credit cards and stopped payments into our joint bank account. Her parents, initially believing her version of events, confronted me, but were shocked when I showed them the truth. They disowned her on the spot, disgusted by her actions. My wife returned with her affair partner to collect her belongings, but she refused to speak to me or the kids. She even shattered our wedding photos before leaving. I had to call my elderly mother for help with the kids while I took time off work. I also ordered DNA tests to confirm our children were mine, which they were, and got tested for STIs, thankfully coming back clean. Weeks later, my wife suggested an amicable divorce, wanting to split everything equally. I refused, reminding her of her betrayal. In court, despite her attempts to lie and prolong the process, I had ample evidence to secure full custody of our children and remove her from the house deed. She left town with her affair partner, and I was relieved to be free from her. This whole experience taught me that you never truly know someone until they reveal their true colors. While I never expected to share such a story after the bunny saga, it's a reminder to pay attention to the warning signs and trust your instincts. I'm now focused on rebuilding my life and being the best father I can be for my kids. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it serves as a cautionary tale for anyone going through something similar. Story 2. I am a 43-year-old man, and I have been married to my wife, Jilly, who is 39, for an impressive 17 years. It's a bit strange to begin talking about my marriage after all this time. But here we are. Like any other relationship, our marriage has had its highs and lows. The first 10 to 11 years were pretty smooth, but about 6 years ago, we hit a major rough patch. The trouble started when my warehouse caught fire. Although the insurance covered our losses, it took me years to recover. Just before this disaster, we had bought a new house with a mortgage. However, we had to sell it and move back to our old home to make ends meet. I had to sell my car, which was a tough decision. Jilly didn't want to part with her car, so I sacrificed mine and used hers when needed. During this difficult period, our marriage hit rock bottom. Jilly wasn't willing to compromise on her lifestyle. We had been living comfortably before the crisis, and suddenly everything changed for the worse. It wasn't just her facing difficulties, we all were, but she acted like she was the only one suffering. She refused to cut back on luxuries like her car, shopping sprees, and regular spa visits. I had to take on multiple responsibilities during this time. Not only did I have to rebuild the business from scratch, but I also had to ensure we had food on the table and cover our kids' school expenses. Instead of being understanding and supportive, Jilly acted like a whiner. Her attitude really frustrated me, and I started distancing myself from her. She manipulated the situation, playing the victim, and her family would get involved. Not necessarily meddling, but making their presence felt. Jilly has always been very close to her family, which is extensive and well-connected. Her parents live just down the street, and 2 of her siblings live nearby. Jilly had an annoying habit of dragging her parents and siblings into our personal matters, which drove me crazy. It's not like they were mean or unfair to me, but I didn't like them getting involved in our stuff. Whenever I tried to keep my problems to myself, she'd hit me with, "Family shares their problems." Sure, they did help out from time to time, but it also made me feel kind of inadequate. Anyway, I somehow managed to get my business back on its feet. It took me a good 5 or 6 years, but I finally got back on track. With my business picking up, I thought our personal life would follow suit. We started going on vacations again, spent weekends hiking, and enjoyed dinners and lunches out. My kids, who had been worried about our finances, were slowly recovering from our frugal lifestyle. However, Jilly remained distant. Last month was our anniversary, and I planned a surprise celebration just like the good old days, thinking it would reignite our lost spark. She seemed thrilled with all the gifts, and our love life did spark up for a short while. But after a week, It went back to square one. She was still the same. And that's when I realized it had to be more than just financial issues causing our relationship to crumble. Up until then, I'd been blaming our money problems for our failing marriage. But now that those were sorted, the next obvious reason that crossed my mind was an affair. So, I decided to do some digging. I attempted to check her phone, but it was password protected and I couldn't crack it. I started paying closer attention to her daily routine. For all those years, I had been oblivious to the red flags. Or maybe when you're working 14 to 16 hours a day, suspecting your wife is the last thing on your mind. Now that I had more free time, I began spending more time with my sons. During one of our conversations, I found out that Jilly was heading out every other afternoon, sometimes even daily. I asked my kids if they knew where she was going, but they had no clue. She never told them. So, I decided to buy a tracking device and discreetly installed it in her car. The very next day, she headed out in the afternoon, and I decided to follow her. She drove nearly 20 miles away and pulled into a hotel. I parked my car a few buildings away and strolled over to the hotel, trying to avoid being seen by either her or her friend. But when I got there, she had disappeared. I couldn't spot her anywhere. So I went inside and snagged a table at the hotel cafe. I waited around for about an hour, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone I knew, but no familiar faces showed up. Eventually, I decided to leave. As I was halfway back, a thought crossed my mind. I should go back and wait for them to leave. I quickly made a U-turn and returned to the hotel. This time, I parked my car and kept watch from inside. After about an hour, she finally came out, and that's when I got a look at her affair partner. I didn't recognize the guy. He might have been someone she met outside our usual social circle. I took photos and videos of them hugging and kissing near the exit. But I didn't want to confront her just yet. She could come up with any excuse to explain it away, and I didn't want to risk blowing my chance. Yes, I wanted something more concrete, like their messages or more videos of their actions. So, I started searching for ways to gather more evidence. And that's how I ended up here on this subreddit. If anyone has been through something similar or has any ideas on how to proceed, I'd really appreciate your input. Thanks a lot. Regarding your question, well, you're right that the photos and videos seem like solid evidence of an affair. However, having more concrete proof, like messages or additional videos, could make your case even stronger in the long run. Update: one of the most common suggestions I received from people was to hire a private investigator. I had conversations with a few agencies to learn about their process and charges, but none of it sounded appealing, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, if I didn't make any headway, I'd consider hiring a PI. One day, while Jilly was occupied in the kitchen, I discreetly placed my phone in a closet and asked her for her phone, pretending I needed to make a call from my number. She unlocked her phone and handed it to me without any suspicion. In just a matter of minutes, I downloaded a hidden clone app onto her phone. My goal was to access her phone data remotely. My first move was to check her chat history. I exported all her chat conversations and gathered information about her affair partner. I even found his email address in her inbox. I came across pictures and videos in her gallery too. I was in a hurry because I wasn't sure how the app would work, and I worried about her receiving any notifications related to the cloning process, so I aimed to collect as much information as possible. After successfully obtaining all this data from her phone, I went to my warehouse to closely examine and review it. The chat history went back 6 months, but it appeared that they had been seeing each other for much longer. They were deeply involved, expressing love for each other and engaging in explicit conversations about their respective partners. It was evident that they had no plans to get married or divorce their spouses. They were simply enjoying their time together while criticizing their partners. Although they exchanged explicit photos, there were no videos of them together. I found out more about her affair partner's background through his social media accounts. His wife holds a demanding professional job, working long hours each day, while he, a baseball coach at a school, has free time in the afternoons, which he apparently spends with other men's wives. Now that I have enough evidence to potentially expose his extramarital affair, I plan to contact his wife. However, before taking any further steps, I want to expose the person living in my house. I don't want her to escape with her dignity intact. I want to humiliate her and make her feel the way she made me feel during my financial crisis. The challenge now is figuring out how to do that. Seeking professional and legal advice might be the best course of action before proceeding. I mean, you already have substantial evidence to pursue legal action against her. Perhaps you don't even need a pie at this point. It seems like you're just going over old ground. Update: in my last update, I talked about collecting evidence by cloning her phone onto mine. I was concerned about the app's functionality and the risk of getting caught, but it remained discreet and hidden for 2 weeks before I deactivated it. By that time, I had gathered enough evidence to make my case. It was utterly revolting to see their live chats. She used to engage in explicit conversations with him, right in front of our kids and me. She would describe what she was wearing and how she was positioned on the couch, expressing her longing for him. My children were right next to her when she said things like, "I wish you were here with me." It was beyond disturbing, and I don't know how I managed to keep my composure in those situations. Imagine this. You're lying next to your wife, and she's texting her lover, openly discussing how she desires his touch at that very moment. Sometimes, she would even touch my back while sharing these explicit desires. There were moments when I wanted to strangle her in her sleep. When I retrieved the data from her phone, I found only a few photos that they had shared, mostly selfies and pictures of new outfits. I initially thought they weren't sharing explicit content, but I was wrong. They were sharing explicit photos, but she promptly deleted them so they didn't get backed up. However, since I was tracking everything in real time, I managed to capture it all. They not only exchanged explicit pictures, but also short videos of themselves engaging in intimate activities. While all this evidence was accumulating, I devised a plan to expose her to her family and friends. I sent an email to all her close family members, including her parents, siblings, godmother, aunts, uncles, and some of her best friends. I invited them to a surprise party, but didn't reveal the reason, simply stating that we were expecting happy news. I made it clear not to tell Jilly or the children about it. I had successfully pulled off a surprise anniversary celebration a few months ago, so I was confident about this one too. This time, however, I needed to ensure that the children were kept out of the confrontation. Regardless of how much I despised Jilly, I couldn't let our children witness her in such a manner. The recipients of my invitation speculated that I had bought a new house since it wasn't our anniversary or anyone's birthday. They might have even thought we were expecting a baby, but that wouldn't have been a surprise to Jilly. I suggested they come together to make the surprise impactful, and I asked Jilly's sister to bring champagne and cake. She readily agreed to help. On the expected evening, just before her family and friends arrived, I arranged for our kids to have a sleepover at their friends' houses. This would ensure they were away from the upcoming confrontation. Meanwhile, Jilly was preoccupied with her lover, indulging in her desires. When her parents, siblings, and guests arrived with champagne and cake, Jilly became curious and questioned me about what was happening. I informed her that I had some news to share. She promptly updated her lover about the situation, explaining that she would be away for a few hours and would continue their intimate conversations once she finished dealing with my news. She sent him plenty of affectionate emojis and archived all their chats, cleverly turning off notifications afterward. She suddenly became affectionate and loving towards me, showering me with hugs and praises. Like everyone else, she assumed that the news I had to share was about our new house or something similar. She couldn't stop expressing how fortunate she felt to have me as her husband. I just smiled patiently, waiting for the others to arrive. When the time was right, I asked Jilly to sit with me at the center of the room. She held my hand with excitement, not suspecting what was about to unfold. The projector was set up in the living room, and the first slideshow began with a shocking image of her locked in a passionate kiss with her affair partner. Before anyone could react, the slideshow swiftly transitioned to explicit chats between them. with enlarged fonts displaying the intimate conversations and the explicit photos they had exchanged. I could sense the nervousness in Jilly as she pleaded with me to stop the slideshow. The presentation was running automatically, and it was becoming uncomfortable for everyone in the room. Her siblings suggested that we discuss our private matters separately, but I immediately objected, questioning why we should do that when all my issues had been laid bare in front of them. I reminded them of the time when I asked Jilly to sell her car and she called them over, convincing me to sell mine instead. I had to rely on public transportation or beg for her car in emergencies. Whenever we faced financial difficulties, they had come to our aid. So today, I believe they should help us resolve this matter as well. The room fell silent as the slideshow continued to play on the projector. Jilly's mother raised her voice, demanding, "What do you want?" I responded with equal intensity, saying, "Tell your daughter to confess everything here in front of everyone." Throughout this, Jilly had been crying, her face hidden in her hands. She was reluctant to speak. After persistent urging and my frustration with her family, she finally looked at me and admitted, "You've made an entire movie about me." I told her that I wanted to hear everything else. When it started, why she felt the need for an affair partner, and what her plans for the future were. Her parents and uncle decided to leave, expressing their desire not to be a part of this chaotic situation. I hoped they would refrain from interfering in my affairs in the future. Meanwhile, her siblings and friends remained to support her. Despite numerous emotional breakdowns, she eventually confessed everything. As I had suspected, it had all begun when we faced financial difficulties. She claimed she never intended to cheat on me, but during that period, I was emotionally distant and she felt lonely. It's ironic to think that during that time, it was me who needed support the most, as I was managing numerous responsibilities. Instead of being there for me, she turned to someone else. According to her, their relationship had started as a friendship and nothing more, and she found solace in him. He felt lonely too. His wife works long hours just like you do. We found common ground in our loneliness, she continued. I apologized for not realizing how our emotional connection turned physical, and we began to enjoy each other's company on a physical level. She continued talking, saying things like, "I'm truly sorry. I'm a terrible person. Please don't let our children see this. They'll hate me, and I'll feel like an awful mom," and so on. Her friends and siblings tried to comfort her. But why? Because she was crying and pleading, and it seemed like no one was trying to understand my pain. I ended up looking like the bad guy because I exposed my wife in front of everyone. She gave me a look and asked, "What did you hope to achieve by airing this in public? We could have resolved this privately." I knew many people would question my actions, wondering why I chose to make this public. I believe I've already explained my reasons sufficiently, and I won't defend myself any further. I've been through so much. I've dedicated more than half of my life to working hard for my family, and this is what I get in return. Now, I no longer care about anyone else except myself and my own well-being. Update: following our confrontation, I served her with divorce papers. I had them prepared in advance while I was gathering evidence. She pleaded with me, saying that divorce wasn't the answer and that it would only harm our children. She even offered to end things with the other man immediately and promised to be a good wife and mother, just as she had been all these years. She felt she deserved a second chance for everything she had done for me and the kids. I told her that introducing another man into our marriage had already disrupted our children's lives, and divorce wouldn't bring any more damage. She asked how we should explain it to them, and I explained that our kids were nearly adults and could understand the situation. I didn't want to hide the divorce from them, but I suggested we reveal the reason in an age-appropriate manner. I also informed her that I would be moving out, and she could stay in the house for the remainder of the lease. I didn't want to continue living in a house surrounded by her family and friends. I told her that the children could decide whom they wanted to live with. Eventually, everyone left, and I couldn't bear the idea of sharing a roof alone with her. So I also left and spent the night at my warehouse. The next morning, I returned home, and the children were already there. Jilly and I sat them down and broke the news about our separation. Surprisingly, they handled it with more maturity than we expected. Children have a keen sense for when their home is broken. I informed them that I would be moving out while their mother would remain in the house until the lease expired or until she figured out her next step. When we told them they could choose which one of us they wanted to live with, they asked which one of us was planning to bring a new boyfriend or girlfriend into the picture. Their question caught me off guard, and I looked at Jilly, explaining that neither of us had plans to remarry anytime soon. They said they needed some time to think, and we respected their decision. In the meantime, I started packing my belongings and loading them onto my truck. I had already found a place for myself, but I was still waiting for possession, which was due in 2 weeks. So I decided to stay at my warehouse until then. As I was leaving, I reassured my children that they didn't need to rush their decision and could let me know whenever they wanted to move in with me. Jilly approached me and asked, "So, is this the end? Are you never going to forgive me?" I replied, "Not anytime soon," and walked away. After setting up a temporary room for myself in the warehouse, I decided to reach out to the affair partner's wife. I felt it was only right to share the truth with her, considering the betrayal she had experienced. I found her email address on a professional social network and sent her a detailed email introducing myself and providing my contact information. Surprisingly, she called me back within 10 minutes. During our conversation, she struggled to find words to express her feelings. I assured her that I understood her pain because I'd been through a similar situation. She broke down and shared that she had been working tirelessly for her family's well-being. Her husband, the affair partner, had once been an aspiring baseball player in his 20s, but an accident left him unable to play. Now, she was the sole breadwinner, working hard to secure their children's future. It was disheartening to hear how he had repaid her love and sacrifices. I told her about my own story and mentioned that I had served divorce papers to Jilly. She said she needed time to think it through and thanked me before ending the call. A week before the D-Day, Jilly's father reached out to apologize. He expressed regret for everything I had gone through because of Jilly. But to be honest, his apology didn't mean much to me at that point. I had endured more than enough. I'll be moving to my new home tomorrow, which is located far from my previous residence. I want to avoid any chance encounters with Jilly, her family, or friends. I do understand that I'll have to see her occasionally because of our children, but that's about it. Right now, all I crave is some peace and quiet. I'll be taking a break from all social platforms for a while.